Hello everyone, this video actually contain higher secondary class 11-12 syllabus for recruitment of assistant teacher for biological sciences, right? So you can see that here, that's zoology portion. There is a two portions you have to give the examination. One part will be zoology, one part will be botany. Now in zoology portion you have to given the invertebrates. Invertebrates, we know that this is it's a basic zoology part, right? Like invertebrates and chordates. So invertebrates you have to given like Porifera, Porifera, Cnidaria, Ctenophora, Platyhelminthes, Nemathelminthes, Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata, then Chordata. All classification you should have an idea. So syllabus of the first contain classification of major phyla up to subclass with examples. Second is special features, that is reproduction in protozoa. These are the actually contain the protozoan reproduction. Protozoans actually, you know that in protozoans there's a special type of reproduction method in paramecium. Reproduction method is there. Then you have to study that part. Polymorphism in Siphonophora. Siphonophora is one example, one of the examples of Cnidarians, and you have to study the polymorphism. There is a different types of zooids forms, dactylozoids, gonozooids, different types of zooids are there. You have to study there. You have to also study the division of livers in Cnidarians, and Cnidarians is the first invertebrates where you can see the division of liver, right? And in case of, you have to also study the respiration in arthropods. Arthropodal different respiratory mechanism in arthropods. Like in case of cockroach you can find the spiracles, right? Now then you have to study the nervous system in gastropods, water vascular system in starfish or echinoderms, right? Nervous system in gastropods, like in molluscan, and you have to study the nervous system of molluscan, and water vascular system in starfish, right? Second is the chordates. Chordate actually contains, see that syllabus of chordate. Chordate actually classification of amphibians, reptiles, mammalians up to orders with examples, right? The second is special features, lateral sense organ in fishes, non-poisonous and poisonous snakes. There's a major difference between poisonous snake and non-poisonous snake. You have to study the what is the difference between poisonous and non-poisonous snake, how you can identify an is poisonous snake versus a non-poisonous snake, and hearts and aortic arches of different, and like in case of fishes hearts, you have to compare with amphibians hearts, you have to compare with reptilian hearts and mammalian hearts. There is a mammalian hearts are four chamber heart, and they from two chamber to three chamber, then four chamber heart, how they evolved. You have to study here brain in man and exoskeleton structure in bird. Brain in man, exoskeleton structure in birds, you have to also study that part. Then third syllabus contains cytology, histology, and developmental biology. Cytology actually deals with the cell, it's a study of the cell. So you can see that structure and function of plasma membrane, mitochondria, Golgi complex, endoplasmic reticulum. You have to study of nucleic acid like DNA physiochemical structure, replication, transcription, role in cell cycle, RNA type, structure of RNA, function, and role in protein synthesis. Like you have to study the central dogma part, central dogma DNA to DNA synthesis, that is called replication, DNA to RNA transcription, and RNA to protein synthesis, that is for translation. And then different types of RNAs are you have find like mRNA, tRNA, rRNA, snRNA, snORNA, hnRNA. You have to study that part, and structure of RNA, and role in protein synthesis, how RNA involved in protein synthesis, what is the difference between prokaryotic protein synthesis and eukaryotic protein synthesis, right? Now third is contain histology of liver, pancreas, and kidney. You have to study the histological difference between liver, pancreas, and kidney. If you gave the biopsy of the or liver tissue, and you can should identify the liver tissue and the pancreatic tissue, what is the facial features of liver tissue has, what is the facial features of pancreatic tissue, and you can differentiate between these three tissues, like histological features of liver, pancreas, and kidney. Histological technique, fixation and fixative, different fixative like in Wind's fluid, fixation, different fixative, a different staining method, modern dye you have to use for histological analysis, outline classification of dyes, right? Now outline knowledge of gametogenesis. Gametogenesis is a part of developmental biology, like ultrastructure of sperm and ovum, morphogenetic movement and cell and fate map. Morphogenetic movement, like you can so during gastrulation, you have found different morphogenetic movements like epiboly, involution, delamination, right? these different morphogenetic movement you have to study, and the fate map or fetal map you have to study here. Concept of organizer in development, organogenesis, development of eye in cheek, it's a developmental biology part. Placental types, different types of placenta, structure and function in rodents, distribution and evolutionary biology and systematics, geographical rim, subdivision and their characteristic, fauna, chemical basis of origin of life. Here you have to study the like Urey Miller experiment, how life came in the earth. That's the basis of chemical origin of life. That is Urey and Miller experiment you have to study here. And how protocell develop, how what's the RNA biology. It's a like called RNA world hypothesis. Modern concept of evolution, that is neo-Darwinism, Hardy-Weinberg principles, Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. Different calculation is there. Allele frequency calculation, gene frequency calculation. You have to do that. Adaptation types like adaptive radiation and adaptive convergence in mammals. Desert adaptation like desert adaptation in camels, rodents, different animals. What's the desert adaptation features. Now then 5 contain biological species concept. What is a species actually? Species are actually or potentially interbreeding natural population which are reproductively isolated from other such groups. Now from species concept, biological species concept, you have to differentiate between evolutionary species concept, morphological species concept and biological species concept, and different types of species concept you have to study. And then importance of classification, principle of zoological nomenclature, modes of speciation like sympatric, allopatric and parapatric speciation you have to study here. Then ecology, animal behavior, biodiversity and conservation. Ecology, this actually contain energy flow in the ecosystem, energy flow in ecosystem like energy flow models, energy flow principles, how the 10% law of energy flow, how 10% law occurs, and you have to different calculation also here is there. Population ecology, growth forms, regulation and population density. When now like growth form like J-shaped growth curve, R-shaped growth curve, right? And in case selected species, R selected species. Now regulation of population density, how we can regulate the population density, differentiate different between the K selected species and R selected species. Like we know that different formula is there, dNdt equal to Rn and dNdt equal to Rn into 1 minus n by K. You have to study here. Community ecology, habitat and niche concept, resource partitioning, species diversity, ecological succession. You have also have to study the ecological succession, how succession occurs, instinctive and learning behavior, complex behavior, fixed action pattern, circadian rhythm, migratory behavior in birds, concept of biodiversity, types of biodiversity and its importance, mega biodiversity zone, by biodiversity hotspot with special reference to India, concept of conservation like in situ and ex situ conservation method, wildlife conservation strategies, how can convert, how we can conserve in situ or in case of ex situ conservation. Like in situ conservation, we found the conservation in their natural habitat. When we conserve the animals in the other than the natural habitat, then we call as a ex situ conservation. Then you have to study between in situ and ex situ differences like zoological park, botanical gardens. These are ex situ conservation, like where the human interference is there. And if you conserve the animals in their local habitat, in their wild habitat, then we called it as a in situ conservation. Parasitology and immunology you have to study here. Life cycle of pathogenicity, clinical features and control of Plasmodium vivax like malarial parasite, Wucheria bankruptcy, which called filariasis. You have to study their life cycle, how they transfer from one, it's a one type of zoonotic disease, and transfer from animal to animals, that's so called zoonotic disease. Mosquito as a vector for disease transmission, like how mosquito transmits different types of diseases you have to study here. Classification of immunoglobulin, that is the antibody classification, like classification antibody on the base on the heavy chain, IgG, IgM, IgD, IgA and Ig. Immunoglobulin antibody also known as immunoglobulin. So IgG is the immunoglobulin G, IgM is the immunoglobulin M, IgD, IgE and IgA. And you have to study here the classification of acquired and immunity, acquired immunity versus immunity. What is the major difference between them? Lymphoid and myeloid cells in immune system, T cell and B cell core operation, macrophage. genetics and molecular biology. You have to also study here genetics and molecular biology, cell cycle, allele concept, multiple allelisms, ABO blood group system, pseudoallele, isoallele, allelic interaction, sex determination with pastoral reference to Drosophila and man. Sex determination in Drosophila and man. Drosophila, that we found that there is no role of Y chromosome in Drosophila for sex determination, right? And in case of human, there is a XX and XY system of sex determination mechanism is there. Gene as a structure and function. You need cystron concept, one gene, one enzyme, one gene, one enzyme, or one polypeptide concept. Sickle cell anemia, thalassemia, different types of genetic disease like thalassemia and sickle cell anemia. Genetics and molecular biology of replication, transcription, and translation, mutation type, deletion, molecular mechanisms, chromosomal aberration, elementary idea of DNA fingerprinting, how DNA fingerprinting can be done, different application of DNA fingerprinting, and DNA gel electrophoresis and PCR method, cloning and oncogene. This also present in the syllabus. Animal physiology and biochemistry, enzymes, enzyme classification, enzyme and enzyme classification, kinetics, factors affecting it like in the role enzyme, action of enzyme on the basis of temperature, different types of enzymes, and allosteric enzymes, Michaelis Menten kinetics, etc. Structure and function of hemoglobin, how hemoglobin, oxyhemoglobin occurs, hemoglobin as a quaternary protein, how the oxygen binding occurs, and oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. Here you have to study here structure of mammalian nephron, physiology of urine formation, osmoregulation, and osmoconformer, nature and origin and propagation of nerve impulse along a neuron, nerve impulse propagation, transport of oxygen, carbon dioxide in mammals, elementary idea of structure of carbohydrate, proteins, and lipid. That is a biochemistry part, how protein structure, how carbohydrate structure, carbohydrate, protein, lipid molecules, how they involve. You have to study here. Endocrinology and reproductive biology. Endocrinology actually deals with endocrine system, that is hormones, how our hormones play important roles in different endocrine glands, like how different endocrine glands involved, right? Then their functions, like thyroid hormones, from pituitary glands, different types of hormones, LH, FSH, TSH, GTH, all hormones function, ADH, how from where they were released, how the action, mechanism of action, how there are different types of receptors, hormonal regulation of gametogenesis in males and females of mammals, and reproductive cycle in mammals, like menstrual cycle, hormonal regulation, brief notes of endocrine disorders, different types of endocrine diseases, how different types of endocrine diseases takes place, right? Then is RIA, that is radioimmunoassay, ELISA, cryopreservation. This will be cryopreservation. These are cryopreservation means preservation in liquid nitrogen minus 196 degrees Celsius. If you preserve something in minus 190 degrees Celsius, this is called cryopreservation. And then RIA is radioimmunoassay, and ELISA stands for enzyme link immunosorbent assay. That's a technique for used during the application for different molecular analysis. And next is environmental biology, nature and sources of major pollutants, of air pollutant, water pollutant, noise pollution. Applied biology, applied zoology part, aquaculture, induced breeding, composite fish culture, exotic fish and their roles, freshwater and brackish water, prawn culture, sericulture, silk varieties in India, mulberry silk culture, disease of silkworm and their control, biology and control of pest, paddy pest, like different like scyphophaga in and anemones, different store gain pest like Cytophilus, rodent pest, bandicoota, and biological and integrated pest management. Last part is animal husbandry, common dairy breeds, cow, techniques of dairy management, brief idea, common poultry breeds, rearing method, disease and control. These are all part of the zoology part of for the recruitment of assistant teacher for biological sciences class 11 and 12 post. And hope this make helpful. In the next video we'll discuss the botany syllabus, which actually both syllabus are present, botany and zoology. In the next video, we'll discuss the botany syllabus of the for recruitment of assistant teacher in class 11 and 12 West Bengal. Thank you.